In this lecture, we're going to start out by looking at privacy, and then we'll look at some of the laws and regulations in the US, the European Union, and international laws. And let's start off with privacy. You, as a citizen, have the right that your personal identifiable information is being kept secure. And since personally identifiable information is quite a mouthful, from here on out, we're just going to call it PII. In the US, the laws and regulations that protect PII is sort of a patchwork. It's something we fix when something breaks. And since there is no overarching vision or idea behind it, in some areas there is excellent protection. In other areas, there's barely any. The European Union, on the other hand, have great privacy laws, and there is strict regulation on how companies can gather data, how they can store it, and how they can use it. Much of what companies just do as everyday business in the United States is illegal in Europe. That's also why you've seen so many lawsuits against Google or Apple or Microsoft. It is because of the strong privacy protection that any consumer living in the European Union have. And this has actually in some cases helped the rest of the world, because some of the big companies realized if they have to be in compliance with the laws and regulations in the EU, it is probably easier as a whole, the entire company, adhere to the stricter privacy guidelines. So PII is data that can be used to uniquely identify, contact, or locate a single person. And that can be your full name. It doesn't always have to be. For me, Thor Peterson, it probably is. My name is unique enough that you can find me using just my name. But just for this lecture, I went and looked up how many John Smiths there are in the United States. 44,900, meaning John Smith is probably not PII. Then we have national identification numbers, driver's license numbers, your IP address in some cases, the license plate on your car, anything that's biometric. We talked about this already. Fingerprints, palm prints, handwriting, anything like that that is completely unique to you. And I'm just going to finish the list off here. There's maybe a handful more. Your credit card numbers, any digital identity that you have, your birthday, your birthplace, and any genetic information. Which then brings us to what is not PII. Again, John Smith, not PII. The country, the state, or the city you live in, your gender, your race, the name of a school you have worked at, your workplace, your job title, how much money you make, and your criminal record. But this is somewhat gray area too. Because if you have someone's, let's say they have a common first and last name, you know where they live, you know how old they are, you know they have a criminal record for tax fraud, then you can probably figure out who they are. And you're not going to get tested on this on the exam. It's not going to say which of these are PII. I don't think so, at least. I've never heard of anyone saying this is on the exam. But if you get a question on the exam where PII is part of the question or part of one of the answers, then logically knowing all these things are PII can help you. It makes sense. I mean, my full name, sure, you can find me using that. If you have my IP address, yes, you can find me. Same with my license, my passport, my credit card numbers. All of those are things that if you have them, you can figure out who I am. And if your name is John Smith, I apologize for using you in my example. You are security through obscurity because there are so many John Smiths in the United States. My name, on the other hand, sticks out like a sore thumb. And now that we have covered privacy, let's look at some of the rules, regulations, and laws you should know for the exam from the US. First off, we have HIPAA, and it is HIPAA, not HIPPA or some other abbreviation. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And this is the law on how health information is handled in the US. It has strict privacy and security rules for handling of PHI, not PII, that is protected health information, not private, not personal, not anything else, protected health information. And those rules apply to health insurers, providers, and clearinghouse agents. Those are the ones that handles claims. And HIPAA has 3 rules: a privacy rule, a security rule, and a breach notification rule. They are what they sound like. Privacy: it is your right that your protected health information is kept private. The security rule: they have to implement appropriate security measures. And then obviously the breach notification rule: if they are breached, they need to let the public know. And those 3 rules also mandate that they have administrative, physical, and technical safeguards in place, and this does require risk analysis. Then we have security breach notification laws. And as mentioned, in the US, it is sort of a patchwork. A couple of years ago, only 47 or 48 states had laws about security breach notification. Now it is all 50 states. But how much or how little that is really depends on the state. Normally, they will require the state to inform anyone who has their PII compromised, but many of them also have an encryption clause, meaning if a company lost the confidential records of, let's say, 100,000 people, if they had that data encrypted, and we assume that that encryption is strong enough, then they might not have to notify anyone. So when you see news and you see someone lost 5,000 or 10,000 or 150 million social security numbers, those are the ones where it was not encrypted. So we can probably safely assume many, many more are compromised. ECPA, or the Electronic Communication Privacy Act, is a little bit older, and it was intended to protect electronic communication against warrantless wiretapping. But with the Patriot Act of 2001, it was weakened to a point where it doesn't really matter, which I guess is a good segue to talk about the US Patriot Act. It drastically expanded on law enforcement's electronic monitoring capabilities. So before the Patriot Act, if police wanted to monitor someone's phone activity, they would get a warrant for one circuit, meaning if Bob talks to John, we can monitor him on that one line. With the Patriot Act, they get blanket authorization for one person, and then they can monitor all communication from and to that person with a single warrant. The Patriot Act also allows ISPs to hand over private information of their customers voluntarily to law enforcement. And then finally, it eases the restrictions on foreign intelligence gathering within the US. And as the last one on this slide, we have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CFAA. And this is where most cybercrimes are prosecuted. Since computer and fraud has come a long way since 1986 when it was first enacted, there has been, 8, 10 amendments to it since then. Most of the amendments I don't think you need to know about. Maybe know that the Patriot Act was one of them in 2001, and in 2008, the Identity Theft Enforcement and Restitution Act. If an individual or a company is found to intentionally have violated it, that can result in criminal penalties. Then we have DLBA, or the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and that applies to financial institutions in the United States. And they enacted it to protect the confidentiality and integrity of the consumer's financial data. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the US laws are reactionary, meaning something bad happens, and they then put in a law to fix that one specific issue. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 is similar to that. There was a lot of accounting scandals in the late 1990s, and as a result of that, they built mandatory compliance standards for the financial industry of publicly traded companies. And this is one of the areas where gross negligence can actually lead to criminal penalties. And then finally, PCI DSS. Again, like we talked about before, it is not a law, but it is a standard by the payment card industry. Anyone who issue credit or debit cards have to adhere to the standard and a minimum set of security requirements. And it mandates security policies, devices, control techniques, and monitoring. And with that, we're done with this lecture. I will see you in the next one.